Makena, a quiet and humble woman from Mbale, lived many years in pain. Her husband, Obasi, treated her badly every day. He often looked at her with disgust and said, "You're lucky I even married you." As if she was nothing without him. No matter how hard Makena tried to please him, it was never enough. She worked long hours, sewing clothes, washing, and even taking night jobs to help with the bills. But Obasi only mocked her. He would laugh at her dreams and call her useless. One day, when she became too tired and broken to serve him, he threw her out of the house like trash. With no place to go, Makena wandered until an old friend in Kisumu offered her a small space to sleep in her tailoring shop. That dusty corner became her new start. Slowly, her beautiful designs began catching attention. Rich clients started coming, loving her style. Year by year, her confidence grew. 5 years later, she owned a fashion house called Makena Luxe Designs, known by East Africa's elite. Meanwhile, Obasi had remarried a showy woman named Chidima, but life turned on him. His business collapsed and he drowned in debt. One day, Chidima applied for a housekeeper job, without knowing it was at Makena's mansion. She got hired. When she saw Makena walk down the stairs in a silk robe, she froze. Makena smiled calmly and handed her a uniform, saying, "Start with the floors. That's where I rebuilt my life." The whole town heard the story. Obasi begged for forgiveness, but Makena never looked back. On national TV, she said, "Even dust, when walked on too long, becomes stone." Makena tried everything to make her marriage work. She woke up early, cooked, cleaned, and still found time to sew clothes for extra money. At night, when everyone was asleep, she took small jobs, washing dishes in people's homes, cleaning shops, doing anything to help with the family bills. But no matter what she did, Obasi only laughed at her. He would say, "Look at you working like a fool. No one wants your cheap clothes." When she came home tired, he didn't care. When she cried, he ignored her. Day by day, his words broke her spirit. She felt like nothing, like her dreams had no meaning. One day, she fell sick from all the stress and hard work. Instead of helping her, Obasi shouted, "You're too broken to be useful." That same day, he threw her out of the house with just a small bag of clothes. No goodbye, no merci. Makena stood outside, tired, sick, heartbroken, and alone. The sky was dark, and so was her world. But she didn't give up. She walked to Kisumu, where an old friend let her sleep in the back of a small tailoring shop. It was not much, but it was safe. Makena picked up her sewing needle again. She stitched dresses during the day and worked on new designs at night. Her hands were tired, but her heart began to hope again. Slowly, customers started noticing her beautiful work. Her name started to spread. She was still the same quiet Makena, but now she was building something. Something of her own. And this time, no one could take it from her. That small corner of a shop became her new beginning. Every dress she made was stitched with pain, hope, and strength. While Obasi thought she was finished, she was actually rising. Not just for herself, but for every woman who had been told she wasn't enough. Makena was no longer broken. She was becoming something stronger. Something unstoppable. Makena had nothing when she left Mbale. No home, no money, not even a place to sleep. All she had was a small bag of clothes, her sewing kit, and a broken heart. She walked for hours, not knowing where to go. She felt tired, alone, and scared, but something inside her kept pushing her forward. When she reached Kisumu, she remembered an old friend who worked at a small tailoring shop. With shaking hands, she knocked on the door. Her friend saw her face and didn't need any explanation. Without asking too many questions, she gave Makena a corner in her shop to rest and stay for a while. Makena didn't want to be a burden. The next day, she asked if she could help with anything. Her friend gave her some leftover fabric and a needle. Makena sat quietly in the back of the shop and started sewing. Her hands moved slowly at first, but soon the old rhythm returned. She stitched carefully, adding beauty to even the smallest pieces. She began making simple dresses, but with so much heart and detail that they looked special. One day, a woman came to the shop to fix her blouse. While waiting, she noticed one of Makena's dresses hanging on the side. "Who made this?" she asked. When she found out, she ordered a custom outfit. That dress ended up at a party full of wealthy women. Soon after, more people came looking for Makena. They loved her designs. Elegant, unique, and full of soul. Slowly word spread. Her name was whispered at salons, shared at lunches, and mentioned at events. Makena didn't even have a signboard, but people came from all over Kisumu just to get a dress from her. She saved every shilling, bought better fabric, and kept working in silence. Her old pain was now her strength. She didn't rush, didn't show off, but her talent spoke for her. From the corner of a tiny shop, the girl who once had nowhere to go was now making clothes for the city's richest women. She was still soft-spoken, but her work was loud. Makena was rising, one stitch at a time. Over the next 5 years, Makena worked like never before. From the moment the sun rose until late at night, she sat behind her sewing machine, creating magic with her hands. She didn't have a big team, just her strength, her vision, and the pain that once tried to break her. Every dress she made was more than just clothing. It carried emotion, grace, and quiet power. Slowly, her name began to spread far beyond Kisumu. Her clients started sharing photos of her beautiful designs online, and soon people in Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Kampala, and even Kigali started to notice her work. With the money she saved from her growing number of clients, Makena opened a small studio and called it Makena Luxe Designs. It was simple, white walls, clean space, and 2 sewing machines, but it was hers. It was the first thing in her life that had her name on it, and that meant everything. Clients walked into her studio and felt peace. They were treated with love and respect, no matter who they were. Many of them came just once, and never stopped coming back. They wore her dresses to weddings, business events, and even on TV. Everyone was asking, who made that? Makena stayed humble. She didn't forget the nights she slept in the corner of that tailoring shop, or the way Obasi told her she was worthless. But now, the same woman who was once told she was broken, was being praised in fashion magazines, and invited to speak at women's events. She trained other girls, many of them survivors like her, and gave them jobs. She told them, "You're not starting from nothing. You're starting from strength." In just 5 years, Makena had turned her pain into power. Her fashion house became one of the most talked about in East Africa. She didn't need to scream for attention. Her work did the talking. And as the world looked at her with admiration, Makena kept walking forward, proud and peaceful, knowing she had built it all with her own 2 hands, and no one could take that away. While Makena was slowly rising and building a new life, Obasi was busy living a very different story. Soon after throwing Makena out, he married a new woman named Chidima. She was loud, full of energy, and loved to show off. She wore shiny clothes, long nails, and took selfies every hour. She wanted the world to see her as rich and important. At first, Obasi enjoyed the attention. They would go to parties, buy expensive things, and pretend they were living the perfect life. But behind the smiles and photos, things were falling apart. Obasi's business was already weak, and without Makena's quiet support and hard work, it started to collapse even faster. Bills began piling up. He borrowed money from friends and took loans from the bank just to keep up with Chidima's lifestyle. She demanded more and more. New clothes, new shoes, dinners at fancy hotels. Obasi didn't know how to say no. He wanted to prove that he had upgraded after Makena. But the truth was nothing was working. Clients left. Deals failed. And soon his business completely shut down. Debt collectors came knocking. His phone rang with people asking for their money. His bank account was empty. Chidima, who once smiled for every camera, now complained daily. "Where is the money you promised?" she would scream. Their home, once full of music and laughter, became silent and tense. Obasi tried to act like everything was fine, but deep inside, he knew he had lost everything. He looked back and realized how much Makena had done for him. All those nights she worked, all the money she brought home, all the peace she kept in the house, he had destroyed it. But now it was too late. Makena was gone, and so was the life he once had. Obasi had traded gold for glitter, and now even the glitter had faded. Everything he built had crumbled. And as Makena's name started appearing on billboards and magazines, Obasi sat quietly in his empty house, drowning in shame, debt, and regret. Chidima was no longer the proud, flashy woman everyone used to admire. Life had hit her hard. The laughter and selfies were gone. The expensive clothes had been sold. Her nails were now short and plain. Even her voice, once loud and full of jokes, had grown quiet. After Obasi's business collapsed, they were left with nothing. Bills kept piling up. Food became a daily worry. The house felt heavy with stress. Chidima tried to be strong, but she was tired. Tired of struggling. Tired of hoping things would get better. One day, she sat with her old phone and started looking for jobs online. Her eyes landed on a simple post. Housekeeper needed. Live-in option. Good pay. She didn't think twice. There was no time to be picky. She clicked apply and sent her name. The next day, she got a message with an address and an interview time. She borrowed transport money and made her way across town. When she arrived, her mouth fell open. The mansion was breathtaking. Tall white pillars, shiny windows, a beautiful garden that looked like it came from a magazine. It was quiet, calm, and looked like a home for someone very rich and important. She knocked at the gate, and a smartly dressed woman welcomed her in. It was Makena's assistant. She spoke politely and asked a few basic questions. Then she smiled and said, "You're hired. You can start tomorrow." Chidima nodded quickly, hiding her shock. That was it. She had a job. She could finally earn something. As she walked out, she took one last look at the house and whispered to herself, maybe things are turning around. But she had no idea what was coming. She didn't know who owned the house. She didn't know whose name was on that mansion gate. Chidima thought she had found a job in a stranger's home. But she had just walked into the house of the woman her husband once called worthless. Destiny had stayed quiet, but now it was ready to speak. The sun was shining through the tall glass windows of the mansion, as Chidima quietly cleaned the living room. Everything in the house sparkled. Crystal vases, polished floors, soft carpets. It was the kind of place she once dreamed of living in. She still didn't know who owned the house. No one had mentioned a name. All she knew was that she had a job, and she needed to keep it. She was sweeping near the bottom of the staircase when she suddenly heard soft footsteps from above. She looked up, and her heart almost stopped. There, coming down the grand staircase, was a woman dressed in a flowing silk robe. It shimmered in the light, soft and graceful. Her skin glowed, her walk was calm and confident, and her eyes were sharp. Chidima's mouth fell open. Her hands dropped the broom. Her heart pounded so loud, she could hear it in her ears. It was Makena. "You." Chidima gasped, her voice barely more than a whisper. Makena didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She kept walking down like a queen returning to her throne. Her eyes met Chidima's, but her face was calm, no anger, no revenge. Just quiet strength. Then she gave a small smile. Not proud. Not loud. Just a powerful smile that spoke louder than any words. It was the smile of a woman who had survived everything thrown at her and risen higher than anyone ever expected. Chidima stood frozen. Shame filled her chest like a heavy stone. She remembered every time she laughed at Makena, every time Obasi said she was useless. And now here Makena was standing in silk and success, in a house so beautiful it felt like a dream. Makena walked past her without a word, leaving behind a silence that said everything. In that moment, Chidima knew the truth. The same woman who once had nothing now had everything. And she, the one who once felt above Makena, now worked beneath her roof. Life had turned its wheel. And Makena was no longer a story of pity, but a symbol of power. Chidima could hardly sleep that night. After seeing Makena in that silk robe, walking down the grand staircase like she owned the world, her mind kept spinning. She lay awake, thinking about everything. About how she used to laugh at Makena behind her back, how Obasi used to call her useless, and how they both believed she would never be anything. But now, Makena had become someone powerful, someone graceful, someone untouchable. And Chidima? She was the housekeeper in her mansion. The next morning, Chidima reported for duty as usual. She avoided eye contact, too ashamed to even lift her head. She waited silently in the kitchen, wondering if Makena would fire her or embarrass her. But Makena walked in calmly, holding something in her hands. It was a neatly folded housekeeping uniform. Without raising her voice, without showing even a hint of anger, Makena held it out to her. Chidima slowly reached out and took it, her hands shaking. Then Makena looked her straight in the eye and said in the softest, clearest voice, You can start with the floors. That's where I rebuilt my life. Those words hit Chidima harder than any scream ever could. There was no insult. No revenge. Just truth. Makena didn't need to shout. Her success did the talking. She had rebuilt her entire life from the very ground Chidima was now asked to clean. And instead of hatred, Makena offered her a lesson. In grace, in growth, and strength. Chidima nodded, tears quietly gathering in her eyes. She put on the uniform and went to work. Her pride broken but her heart wide open. Because now she understood. Makena wasn't just rich. She was powerful in a way money couldn't explain. She had turned pain into purpose. And her silence was louder than any words. And as Chidima bent down to clean those shiny marble floors, she realized that sometimes, the ground you once looked down on, is the very place where real power rises. News travels fast, especially in small towns like Mbale. But this news? It spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking. At markets, on buses, even in salons, people whispered and gasped. Did you hear? Makena, the quiet woman Obasi used to beat, she owns a mansion now. And guess what? Obasi's new wife is working for her. It sounded like something from a movie, but it was real. The same Makena people once pitted was now a queen in her own right. And Obasi? He was just a man trying to hold together the broken pieces of his pride. Obasi heard the rumors too. At first he didn't believe them. But when he saw a video of Makena giving an interview on TV, standing in front of her luxury fashion house, dressed in all white, glowing with confidence, he froze. He barely recognized her. She wasn't the scared woman he once yelled at. She wasn't the one he threw out like trash. She was different now. She had become someone powerful, respected, and admired. Guilt hit him like a storm. He tried to reach out. He asked people for her number. He even sent a message through a mutual friend. Then one day, he gathered the courage to go to her office. He stood at the reception, sweaty and nervous, and asked to speak to her. But when the assistant went in to tell Makena, she came back with a message. She has nothing to say to you. Obasi stood there, silent, feeling small for the first time in his life. No one screamed at him. No one pushed him out. But the silence hurt more than any insult ever could. Makena had nothing to prove. She didn't need revenge. Her life was her answer. And in Mbale, that silence spoke louder than words. People shook their heads and said, he had a diamond, and he crushed it. But she turned into gold. The story became a legend. Not of Makena's pain, but of her rise. A rise so strong. Even the man who broke her now stood beneath her shadow. Makena didn't just stop at success. She knew there were many other women still suffering in silence, just like she once did. So she decided to do something bigger. Something that would help others rise, too. She launched a foundation called Rise from the Dust. It was a safe place for women who had faced abuse, rejection, and pain. Women came with broken hearts, broken dreams, and even bruised faces. But Makena welcomed them all, not with pity, but with hope. She gave them training, shelter, and most importantly, the strength to believe in themselves again. Soon, her story caught the attention of the media. One day, she was invited to speak on national television. As she sat in the studio, wearing one of her signature designs, the audience watched in silence. Her voice was calm but powerful as she shared everything. From the beatings, the mockery, the loneliness, and the day Obasi kicked her out. But she also spoke of healing, of second chances, of turning pain into purpose. Everyone in the room listened closely, many with tears in their eyes. And just before the interview ended, Makena looked into the camera and said her final words, slowly and clearly. Even dust, when walked over too long, becomes stone. The studio went silent. Then applause filled the air. That one line touched hearts across the country. It was shared on social media, printed in newspapers, and spoken in churches and classrooms. Makena had become more than a fashion icon. She had become a symbol of strength. She was once dust, stepped on and ignored. But now she was stone strong, unshakable, and standing tall for all to see.